So over on the JP version of the game, we have a download campaign that just hit us, and it's bringing a lot of the 5.5 servants back. And the main highlight servant is Ibuki Douji, the big thicky snake herself. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, bro, we gotta talk about Ibuki. I need to scream her greatness to the heavens and get people gassed up about this, because this is like a borderline must summon servant. I know last year, or like the end of last year when I did the tier list for the servants that came out for that year, I ended up putting Ibuki Douji in A tier, but if you were to ask me now after using her a bit more, I probably would bump her up into S tier, because she's just an absolute godly servant all around. There may be like one or two critiques that I have for Ibuki Douji. We'll talk about that as we go through the video, but I mean, if you summon for this servant and you manage to get her, even at NP1, this girl is an absolute beast. So strap in with me and we're going to go ahead and talk about Ibuki Douji. But before we do that, if you have not already, what are you doing? Click the like button, click the subscribe button. Your boy is on that road to 100K and he needs all the support that he can possibly get. So help your boy out. It's absolutely free to do so. I'm out here putting out daily FGO content, so the least you could do is a little bit of free interaction. If you also want more content, I do stream on Twitch every weekday. That is going to be linked down in the description down below. And if you want to know exactly when I stream, well, you can go to my Twitch page and there's a little schedule tab, and it should show you when I stream in your own local time. So that way you can figure out like, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, maybe I can't make it to those streams, but Tuesday, Thursdays are a little later, so I could probably make it to those. And then finally, you can click that join button if you want to go that extra mile in showing your support for the channel. Channel members are going to be getting extra content here in a little bit, so if that interests you, click that join button. But with that being said, on to more important things, talking about the absolute big thickie herself, the queen of dragons, the biggest snake, my actual 15-foot tall waifu, Ibuki Douji. Let's dive right into Ibuki. And yes, when I say let's dive into this servant, I mean let's dive right into this servant, starting off with her hits. And already when you look at Ibuki Douji's hits, you see that this is a servant that is meant for absolute pure destruction and carnage, okay? 3 Buster cards. You know what that means? That means no NP required, Buster Brave Chain, destroy everything in sight. She may have the class of a Saber, but she's definitely playing like a Berserker. That being said, you're going to be very reliant on that one arts card when you do see it around, but thankfully it does have 0.78% NP gen, and it's packing 3 hits, so whenever that arts card does come around, Lord willing that you get a crit on that arts card, you will refund a metric ton of your NP back. Although even if you do miss the crit on that arts card, Ibuki Douji does have something in the back pocket to help her out when it comes to her NP generation. Her quick card is a little bit on the weaker side, then again, she's not an assassin, she's not a star genning servant, so it doesn't need to be strong. They gave it 4 hits on it with 9.9% star gen. And then something of note is that she actually does have a passive 9% buff to that quick card. So it's like not terrible, but again, I don't know what you think you're doing trying to click the quick card when she's got a triple Buster deck and the whole name of the game is obliterate everything in Ibuki Douji's path. And then you guys know that I already love that she's got that 5-hit extra attack. DW did me nice on this one. They're like, hey bro, ZTL's gonna love his big thicky snake waifu, so let's go ahead and give her a 5-hit extra attack. If you don't know why that's good, the extra attack is basically a composite card that gens stars, NP, and does big boy damage, especially now with the advent of append skills. You can actually buff that effectiveness by 50%, and the extra attack does really, really well when you have naturally high NP gen and star gen stats, and her NP gen stat is actually pretty high. So you might be able to pop off a little bit when you're doing Brave Chains, which is pretty much what you want to do with Ibuki Douji because you want to obliterate everything in sight. Well, let's go ahead and talk about her skills, because her skills are the medium for her to be just this absolute avatar of destruction, right? She's like the premium busty Buster servant that's come out recently, and these skills are what help her do all that destructionizing. So starting off with skill 1, you could almost see this as like a better version of monstrous strength in a way. So monstrous strength, if you guys don't know, is typically given to a lot of like the really big monster characters, and it's generally like a 40% attack buff that lasts for 1 or 2 turns. Ibuki Douji is getting something a little bit different. She's getting that same 40% attack buff that lasts for 3 turns, but the caveat is that it only lasts for 3 hits. So it can be better or it could be worse than monstrous strength depending on how you play it. You could drag the effect out for all 3 turns and get like kind of a spread it out amount of damage, or you could just pop off in 1 turn and he did a whole lot of damage, but it would have been better if you had the 2-turn buff. So just depending on how you use it, you can see it as being better or worse than the normal monster strength. But regardless, it's still a 40% attack buff. Like, that is a monstrous amount of power for her to be getting for just a raw attack buff for absolutely free. And then it also comes equipped with a 50% battery, which is even better now. Like, 50% batteries were already really good because it gave you a lot of synergy with event CEs, and it made you just very, very generally good for farming, which is like 99% of the game. But now it's even better with Koyanskaya because pretty much any Buster Servant with a 50% battery is primed to be really, really good in the Koyanskaya meta. So that actually just made Ibuki Douji even more valuable because she's a very good premium Buster AoE Saber with a 50% battery. So she's kind of like the go-to lady when it comes to Koyanskaya. And that's just skill 1. Moving on to skill 2, she's getting a 30% Buster buff for 3 turns, but don't be deceived, it's actually higher than 30% because again, she has a passive skill that's basically functioning as a madness enhancement skill because it's giving her a passive 12% buff to her Buster cards. So when this skill is up, she actually has a 42% Buster buff, which is a little bit more than the more rarer buff that some servants will get, where it's like a 40% buff for 3 turns. They're power creeping Ibuki Douji just a little bit by giving her 42%, which we love to see. Funny enough, that passive skill also gives her some damage cut, which does pair pretty well with the 30% defense that she's getting for 3 turns. It makes her just a little bit tanky. And then she's also getting 20 stars to play around with, all on a 5-turn cooldown. So very, very good skill. This is one of those skills that you want to try to have up as much as possible because it's just passively buffing up the damage for your NP and the Buster Brave chains that you want to do with her face cards. And then it's also just making her pretty tanky as well by giving her 30% defense, which pairs nicely again with her passive damage cut to just kind of make her a little more defensive because she doesn't have any actual hard line survivability. Like, she doesn't have a dodge, she doesn't have invincibility, no guts, no nothing. So she doesn't have any way to really dip and dodge around NPs. Her main method of survivability is to just obliterate the opponent and hope you don't get obliterated before you obliterate them. Especially because she's really good with Koyanskaya, but Koyanskaya also really doesn't offer any survivability either. So it's a very volatile, but very, 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 very strong team. Like, it does a lot of damage, but you gotta basically beat them in a few turns before you get curse-smacked. Although, obviously, you can use Mystic Codes to kind of make up for that. You can just slap an invincibility on Ibuki Douji and kind of fix the entire problem there. But I do think that's probably going to be something they give her when they do buff her, is just some method of survivability. Maybe they slap that on the NP, or they do like a generic NP buff where they give it a little bit of damage scaling, and then for that turn she gets like invincibility or something. That could be pretty cool. Or maybe they'll buff her 3rd skill, because her 3rd skill is like kind of a utility skill mixed with more damage because she's sealing one enemy's NP for a turn, which again is supposed to contribute to her survivability. It's supposed to buy you an extra turn. So if you're pairing her with someone like Merlin, you can get Merlin's 2nd skill back, or maybe you need to get an invincibility with your Mystic Code, something along those lines, just to buy you that extra turn. It is just generally a very good skill. But then as you can see, she's getting even more Ooga Booga damage. She's getting 50% crit damage for 3 turn. Again, that is the equivalent to Waver's crit damage that he gives to people, so it's a very solid crit damage buff. And then she has a pretty decent damage mod against undead enemies, 50% for 3 turns, all on a 6-turn cooldown. Unfortunately, there's no undead servants right now, like none of them have the undead tag. But thankfully, a lot of the undead mobs that you will be fighting are just very general, like, enemies that you'll encounter in pretty much any event or any singularity, or like a Lost Belt chapter. Like, pretty much anything is going to have some of these enemies, because it's just like the skeletons, the ghosts, just like generic trash mob enemies that you'll probably always fight. So it does make Ibuki pretty solid, because even though it might look like it's a small category, these are all very, very common enemies. So overall, her skills are pretty much here to just obliterate whoever she's coming into contact with, and then give her a little bit of tankiness with the defense, the damage cut, and the NP seal. But the main thing you're doing with Ibuki Douji is just obliterating people, and her NP just takes that to the next level, because it probably has some of the best effects you could possibly get on an NP. It has Pierce Invincibility and Pierce Defense built into the NP, meaning the only way you're not getting curse-smacked by Ibuki's NP is either you have some weird special damage resistance, or you have Solemn Defense. But we haven't fought Castoria at all on the JP version. Still to this day, haven't fought anybody with Solemn Defense. So this essentially means that Ibuki Douji is just splashable for any boss fight, because she doesn't care about their dodges, their invincibility, their defense. None of that matters to her. She just absolutely obliterates people with her NP. And then she has a very powerful overcharge effect that unfortunately doesn't activate first. I wish it did, but then she'd be really, really good. Her overcharge is that she reduces all enemies' buster resistance by 20 to 40% for 3 turns. Even though it doesn't activate first, this is still very good for Buster Brave Chains, because the follow-up Buster cards will do insane amounts of damage, because they basically get an extra buff from attacking into somebody that has the Buster down. Now that being said, Ibuki's NP damage is still rather good. Even if you look at her NP damage without the special damage mod or without the Buster resistance, she's still very high up there when it comes to Buster AoE and just AoE sabers in general. If she gets the special damage mod, she's out damaging Artoria, who is currently the highest damaging Buster AoE saber, so that's pretty good. And then if you give her the Buster resistance, like you say you get like a follow-up NP or something, she won't out damage Artoria, but she gets really, really close. Although I would still probably bring Ibuki over Artoria because she actually has like the crit damage buff. And I feel like you're getting more value out of Ibuki than you are Artoria, because Artoria also doesn't have any survivability at all whatsoever. But she doesn't have like the crit damage, the special damage mod, the NP ceiling, the decent defense. But I also feel like this is a little unfair because Artoria is a year 1 servant and Ibuki is a very recent servant, so it feels a little unfair to be comparing them. But you know, I gotta come out here and defend my girl Ibuki, right? Like, even if she's not out damaging Artoria by like 2,000 damage, I believe it is, like it's very, very slim when she has the Buster resistance down. I just feel like Ibuki Douji is just far and away a better built servant, and is definitely worth summoning for if you do not have a very strong Buster AoE servant just in general. Because you can get away with bringing her to some fights type neutral just because she outputs so much damage, especially if you have someone like Koyanskaya or Merlin to really gas up her damage. Because that NP effect of being able to basically just pierce everything makes her so good and so valuable for harder fights. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you think they could give Ibuki Douji going in the future? I just want to see like an invincibility or something for a turn. I just want to see her get some hardline way to kind of keep herself alive. Or maybe even a Guts. I think a Guts could also be pretty good. Just let me know what you guys want to see her get in the future. Let me know what you guys think about Ibuki Douji, and let me know if you're going to be summoning for her on the JP version of the game. Again, I'm telling people, JP is pretty bussin' right now. Like, you have Himiko that you can get, and then you could also summon for Ibuki Douji. That's pretty much already a really good team set up right there. Then you just bring a Buddy Merlin or something, and you're absolutely popping off. Now would be a pretty good time to go ahead and start JP, but with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace late, guys.